I would say the vast majority, I would say the best of YouTube clips are always available by searching my name. The most popular one was one when I really had a serious, it was the day I was finishing the banking chapter of my book. I hadn't slept in a long time, and the government was behaving in a particularly stupid manner, and
you don't need an excuse. It's all right.
No, but it was pretty intense. And then, you know, anyway, YouTube will give you probably everything you're looking for.
Dylan Ratigan,
you say Dylan Ratigan loses his shit, stuff like that.
And I loved it.
Yeah,
I absolutely loved it.
Listen, I was impressed. Basically, the one quick story on that rant was after that happened, I walked off into the green room, and the executive producer of the network came up to me, who really was very patient with me, and I was sort of unlike most of the people that work there in general anyway. And walked up to me right away and he said, "That was pretty intense, you know." And I said, "Yeah, it's pretty intense." And he's like, "You think you're gonna need to do that again?" I was like, "I probably need to do it again." He's like, "That's good." And that was the whole conversation that I had with that phone.
Yes, sir.
I'm the kind of guy that would probably be the last guy that would say eye for an eye. I'm big on crime. But we totally need to, throw more people in prisons. But I'm just curious, and not to disrespect that model at all in any way, shape, or form. But over in your model that you built, you are the one that built it, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Do you have ideas for psychopaths, where they would be going, who would be helping them psychologically?
Where's the criminal justice system?
Yeah.
Yeah, well, with that, as far as that's a whole human behavioral, issue right there, and I think, bringing up the how the environment affects us, we would address that and actually give that person the help that they need, kind of like how they do in, I believe it's Norway. Actually, they have an area where they send these people to actually learn to live with and interact with the populace again. So instead of putting them into enclosed prisons and just feeding them environmental stimulus in a negative way, we would actually give them the help that they need, because it's a humanistic society. So obviously you couldn't have them out running around the streets still creating more havoc. So you'd have to deal with that, but don't slam them away in a prison for the rest of their life. Give them the tools that they need to actually fix the problem, or whatever the issue is.
One thing that I'll just add to that is just from a scientific research standpoint, having been through 30 years of 3 strikes and all the things that we've done now, they've now statistically, scientifically proven, I got a big mouth, that the typical criminal cannot differentiate between the threat of a 1-year prison sentence and a 30-year prison sentence. That when you're on the outside, the only thing you don't want to do is go to jail. But whether you're going to jail for a year or 30 years on the outside is almost an indistinguishable. There's something in the finance world called net present value, right? So the net present value of a 30-year sentence is basically slightly more than a 1-year sentence. And the most effective criminal justice system that I'm aware of is called Operation Hope, which is being run by the district attorney in the state of Hawaii, who has realized that raise your hand if you know when somebody doesn't want to go to jail. No one wants to go to jail right now. I'm going to take you to jail right now. You'll go to jail tomorrow, you go to jail next week. What you don't want to go to jail is right now. You don't want to get out of this room and go to jail. And so what the Operation Hope does is it puts people in jail right now. But it puts them in jail right now for 2 days. Right now. As opposed to many years. And that has created a 90% decline in the recidivism rate. It keeps people in the society as opposed to out of this. Right now we're financing, basically, instead of sending people to imagine we're paying for people to go to college. Now instead we're paying to train people on how to be really aggressive and nasty to each other in prison. And then we're like, okay, are you fully trained on how to be a real motherfucker? Perfect, you've graduated, why don't you go back out now, see how you do. And then they're terrible, and we're like, man, this guy's terrible, put him back in jail. And so now we're financing, and what Mike is saying is, well, why don't we finance moving the harmonics more towards a constructive principle. Anyway, so the point is, if you're interested in criminal justice, one book I strongly recommend is called Don't Shoot, which is by David Kennedy. who has managed to achieve 80 and 90% reductions in urban violence by hot-spotting you can basically identify in a given city probably 20 to 100 people who are the ones that are most likely to kill somebody in a gang situation. And then you can identify the 2 or 3 people, their cousin, their aunt, their child, their brother, who are the most connected to that person. It's a very granular work, but they actually go and sit with the individuals and say, listen, I don't care if you hang out in the corner and smoke weed. I don't care if you even go to school. But the one thing I can't have you do is use a gun to shoot another person. And when the conversation is had in that context, the number of times people get shot goes down 80%. So there's a whole lot of new research on criminal justice that could certainly complement dang Bill over there.
And that's why I mentioned in my presentation about our leadership, why our leadership needs to be composed of technicians and social scientists. Well, social scientists understand this stuff with human behavior and how to effectively deal with that.
Thanks.
Yep. Yes, ma'am.
Gentlemen in the half.
Dylan Ratigan, right?
Yes, sir.
All right. As a media guy, I wanted to know if there was ever times when you saw the media specifically putting out a story that most people knew weren't true, or it was, designed to kind of, deflect people from the truth. And my second question was, what media is there that you would think people could trust?
So on the first question, I've always found most media conspiracy theories entertaining when you're on the other side. The best conspiracy theory for the media is a highly disorganized, self-absorbed bunch of people trying to get into the best party. I've never seen a deliberate introduction of misleading information, but the news judgment of what news is and isn't is entirely through the lens of, I don't know where Will is, but over there, through the lens of what's the lowest cost, most titillating piece of content that we can most rapidly get out there. So there's a natural selection bias that does those sorts of things, but the organized principle of, oh, this is a really important thing and we're going to do this really not important thing to distract them from that important thing, certainly doesn't exist within the media. It definitely exists within corporate boardrooms in the government, right? Insofar as we will put out, the best time to put out like a terrible piece of news would have been during the Boston bombing, right? Because it's not going to get any coverage. So I mean, there's a lot of manipulation for things like that. What was the second question?
That, well, now I have a third question.
Oh, news sources that I trust.
Right.
My most reliable news source for me, honestly, is my Twitter feed, more than anything else. My Twitter, some of the reporters that I respect the most, I really think Glenn Greenwald does a good job certainly on the Supreme Court, certainly on civil rights, certainly on the drones and the military. I'm trying to think of some others that I think Henry Blodgett and Business Insider actually does a reasonable job of covering the financial system and the financial markets.
Realnews.com.
I'm not. The closer you can get to the local reporting, and the further you can get from the aggregators or the commercial news operations. So I would tweet the most reliable reporting I found, honestly, during the Boston Marathon issue, came from local Boston reporters who were seasoned Boston reporters, the Boston reporters from the Boston Globe, and a couple of other people that were managing very I thought were doing the best job. But I would just skew that you want to go as local as you can get for information, and as far away from the aggregators and the commercial apparatus as you can go.
I had a question that was kind of along the same lines of his, but a little less, to deal with crime. But when you talk about sharing resources, for example, and like having a library where people share camera equipment or stuff like that. Have you guys thought about, how do you deal with people who just don't respect property like other people do? What if people check stuff out and they bring it back in broken? Or I feel like most people in the population don't have a huge respect for material items, and if you're going to be using them collectively, how do you deal with that? Like if someone checks it out and then I get the camera and suddenly something's not functioning right on it. It seems like that could be such a huge problem.
Well, again, that goes back to a human behavioral issue. With the concept with this, and you got your transition period and your period where most people are actually sane. So as far as dealing with that type of thing, the concept is kind of like a library, but in the sense that you can check something out and keep it as long as you want for your whole life if you want to. But as far as like people destroying stuff just out of the sheer need for excitement, I think those things would be dealt with as far as like on a human behavioral value system level, as far as like making sure that people have the level of excitement that they need in their lives, a sense of purpose, and to be able to expand on their creativity. Those kind of things you don't see today in a monetary structure. It's hard to pursue that type of direction. And you guys feel free to add in.
Yeah, I just want to throw in something. It's not as if the city's going to be built tomorrow and everyone has to just change. It's going to take time, and when time happens, things will change. People will start to realize things. And then one of the first, even if we built a city, even before, wouldn't we want to provide free education, which is one of the main points, the main concepts of RBE? And then if people have access to free education, will they not go? And if they do, will they change? I'm pretty sure they will. But yeah, it's not the whole concept of we're going to have a city tomorrow and everyone's just going to start change. You have to learn that in order to establish that in the first place. So yeah, education is a huge part of the transition. I'm sorry. Transition. Yeah. So the transition is a huge part. It's not like a RBE will happen next week.
So,
and if it did, it wouldn't.
Basically, what imagine you're in a definitely a transition. We're going to have a lot of stumbling blocks to contend with. But you imagine a world, say, 100, 500 years from now, if we ever get there, that you're born into the world, and from birth as a baby all the way to adulthood, you're actually cared for in your environment. You're not taught this value system of taking strategic advantage over each other for mere survival, which that's what's going on in our monetary structure today. If you don't make money, you can't pay your rent, you can't buy food, no one gives a shit. You're out on the streets. But this type of society, people truly care for you from birth all the way to adulthood. So you can imagine you'd have some pretty different values that are prevalent in that type of society.
The only other thing I'd add to that is if you look at the current sort of resource sharing structures, Airbnb, Uber, there's a whole bunch of them. There's actually a remarkable, the vast majority of the participants are remarkably respectful, more than you would think. And even things like the eBay star system, like there's preliminary things right now where if somebody's, every time they check out a camera, they break it, they get 1 star. You can't check out a camera, okay? You gotta get 5 stars if you want to check out a camera. And so if you do, again, a lot of these systems, I've actually been impressed, because I was very skeptical of a lot of this, the preliminary resource sharing things from the generation just underneath me who decided, we don't all need cars or we don't all need apartments because we'll share our cars with each other. And we'll share our apartments with each other, which for me was nuts. But they do it, and they don't destroy each other's cars and apartments.
And then primitive cultures have done that for decades, and it's all just what's going on in their value system within that particular culture.
Also, just looking at this camera made me think of an example. So in RBE, if I wanted to get a camera, right? Why do I want to get a camera? It's not because it's valuable where I can sell it. See what I'm saying? I want to get a camera because it takes pictures. So that's the reason I would go to the library and get a camera. I'm not getting it to try to get anything of value in
or to
this
smash it.
And that's the mindset we have today.
I guess don't trust human person. And so I think no matter what, there could be people out there who are just like, I just want to break this fucking camera because I just want to break this fucking camera. Or maybe they saw you using that camera and they don't like you, so they're going to break it.
That's okay. But remember, we'll be able to print more cameras on the 3D printer.
Of course.
I just like the idea.
But
right now we have libraries of books. People don't necessarily go and tear out the pages of the books. You know, when somebody first proposed that idea, hey, let's put all our books in a library and share them for free, it might have not gone over so well, but somehow it works. I mean, books get torn up, but it still works. We're still capable of it.
We should try at least. We should try
Yeah, I know, sure. Yeah, and I also just think that ultimately that culture dictates more than anything else. It's not even resource availability so much as it is culture that's the dictate. The one story that strikes me is I have a contemporary of mine who to this day works on Wall Street, and he was just telling me how basically for my generation and guys older than me, the whole thing on Wall Street is you make a lot of money and you buy cars and you buy boats and you buy houses and you buy objects. And he's talking about how he has guys and gals who work for him who he's paying, who are more your ages, 25, 28, 31, 32, who he's paying $1 million a year to them. And they don't want to buy stuff. Because they're like, why am I going to buy? They're like, don't you want to buy? Look at this car. Look at I'll use her car. And it's confused. He's like, something's wrong with that. But there is already a culture shift, regardless of anything else. There's already a culture shift that's going on, and for me, more than anything, it's just reflective of the fact that culture is what dictates behavior more than resource availability or human nature. And what you're talking about is though it would be a cultural transition.
Someone up there.
So we're speaking of human nature here, and there's so many jobs now that revolve on economy and making money. You say Wall Street. What do we do with all these people that have jobs that revolve solely on money and the economics of the world? Is there going to be enough jobs on the planet in this system that keeps everybody busy? Because most of us, if we don't have anything to do, we lose our minds at home.
Oh, you go surfing or something, man.
Yeah. I mean, I'd be, for me, myself, God, I'd be busy doing so much stuff. Because I wouldn't have to worry about
in the woods, man.
I mean, you love being in the woods and catching squirrels and whatnot. But like my wife, her life revolves on being able to make money, not because she's egotistical or just loves money. Just she's good at doing loans, and that's what she loves.
Well, what would she do if she didn't have to do that, though?
Honestly, I don't even know.
That is the good question. Anyway, sorry, go ahead.
I just want to throw in, we did a poster project about BOA where we asked people, what if money were no object, what would you do? And that's the whole concept behind an RV. I mean, would you really go out and kill people, or would you really go out and sit there and do insurance paperwork?
But I think his point is that this sort of reality, as we talk about it, and I agree with him, inherently creates for large percentages of the professional population an existential crisis.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
If my value as whatever that profession is no longer has use or value, then why am I here and what am I to do? And I think there would be a large professional network. I mean, there would be a large professional network of professionals dealing with people having a major crisis as to what the hell they're going to do now. I mean,
if you look at this from a standpoint, but if you look at it from a standpoint where if you just pick up someone living in today's society and drop them in the middle of an RVE city, yeah, they wouldn't know what to do with themselves. It'd be like taking an indigenous person that lives in the Amazon, that the only people he knew was the tribe that he grew up with, and throw him in the middle of Manhattan. It would have the same effect. There has to be an education process that's involved in transitioning into a resource-based economy. There's a lot of people that engage in just a lot. It's called mind lock, where you are focusing so much in this little part of your world, and you don't see the rest. You don't see the rest of the world going on around you. And you're so focused on your career, your specialization. Well, the people of the future are going to be more of a generalist and have a larger point of view of what the world actually is doing and what it looks like, and have more access to to that information, and not necessarily have to specialize in a little microcosm area of society. They'll have the capability to participate more in the in the greater zeitgeist, so to speak.
Yeah, instead of spending your time fighting wars, you're fighting the wars against cancer and heart disease.
But the interesting thing is, especially with the financial professions right now, which I think is really what you're asking about, the financial professions carry a tremendous amount of prestige in our society right now, right?
It's
and
that
they attract some of the best educated people in our country. They attract some of the hardest working people in our country. They attract some of the some of the smartest people in our country. And so it is, but there was a time when it was engineers, it was civil engineers that attracted those people, or it was physicians, or it was science. So I would argue that your wife may become a biologist, or she may become a scientist of some kind, something that allows her to utilize some of the calculatory components that are gratifying for her in her mind, and risk management and those sorts of things, to use a scientific method to do cellular tissue regeneration for human beings. So it's about redirect. It's about for people who it's a trick, but it's possible.
And going on what Will was saying too, the little project we did for people writing down what they would do, it's on that cloth right over there in the corner. If you haven't seen it yet, just kind of take a look at it.
And because I know you personally, I think she would spend time with her kids. She loves her kids, so.
That's what most
people. A pediatrician.
Yeah.
Also, I wanted to mention, there's so many people out there that are going to school for social services, that are going to school to study psychology, that are going to school to study humanities and how to contribute to society, that get out of college, they have a degree, they don't have a job. They don't have a place to apply what they have learned because we don't have the funding for that now in our current economic structure. So, I mean, those people would be able to take what they've learned and actually be able to apply it possibly. Whereas now they're in sales.
You had a question back there?
Two-part question. One thing, things are always changing. And people, whether it's changing in a positive direction like this or in a more negative direction, people have, we had the Industrial Revolution. People have to change, and it's difficult, but they have to. I actually had a question, and it's also about what Dylan said about the changing the myth. Those people have great respect right now in our culture. We need to change that culture to have the respect go to the people who are graduating with the social services and gradually change the myth. Also, I had a question about get the money out of politics, a program that you had started back on your show, and the move to amend. Are we walking away from that and making a new, rather than changing the old, make a new and start there?
I mean, I can only speak for myself, but I'll give you a very quick update on the state of play because I still talk to all the organizations in the get money out of politics domain. There are more people than ever that are working on it. Buddy Romer's working on it. Ben and Jerry are working on it. People for the American Way. Jank Uger. I don't even. There's a bunch of them. And we all still talk on the phone, actually, for what that's worth. And I find each phone call incrementally more frustrating than the last phone call I was on, which makes me want to work more with Mike and the veterans and build greenhouses and spend less time talking about these fools and political movements. The reason for that is because the political movement people tend to be very concerned about their particular interpretation of what needs to be done. And so basically the status of Get Money Out, as I see it, is largely splintered among the self-serving desires of the sub-organizations that are trying to raise money based on the idea of doing that. And so I couldn't be bothered. I can't do that, especially when there's the opportunity to work with these guys in the back here and him. But I stand ready if there is ever a harmonic shift in the nature of the Get Money Out aspects where there's a cohesion in that, I would jump in wholeheartedly. But having made the decision, again, to control my thoughts and my actions and those things and do things that actually have a positive harmonic, this is it.
Oh, so for myths and archetypes, do you think like real people are more powerful? Like let's say Hollywood were to make like more movies based on real people, like Martin Luther King, or like revolutionary figures in history, or should it be more like Spider-Man or Batman, where it's kind of like they may have a good approach to humanity, but they're fake? Which ones do you think are better?
You know, the true answer is I don't know the answer to that question. I would say this is my instinct. A myth is a story. A story is as good as the degree to which the decisions of the character in the story are relatable to the person consuming the story. If the decisions of the character are impactful on the consumer of the story, I don't know if it matters who the character is. If the character is a cartoon piece of bubble gum that everybody relates to, that's great. If the character is a very tangible, real person, that's great. I would leave it to the creativity of the filmmakers and invite filmmakers to be. I think one of the big jobs in Danville over there is going to be people making movies for each other and sharing myths with each other. And what that looks like exactly, I don't know. But I think that again, it's the capacity for the myth to be internalized by it's the decisions that the character makes that matter the most, and it is the degree to which the consumers of the character's decisions can relate to those decisions and say, so for me, when Colin Archibald said what he said to me, that really, the myth that he had meant a lot to me. So it really affected my decisions. I don't know if that was an answer or not.
Maybe it's good to start out with that link, where people can identify with the more the fake character, and then see as that fake character progresses into a real character and has a real experience by the end, becomes like a real person. I think that'd be a good.
The one thing I will say is a myth that no one sees is less effective than a myth that a lot of people see. And frequently within the creative community, people don't clear the first threshold, which is, are a lot of people going to consume this? And you have to clear the first, no matter how principled an artist you may be, if you cannot produce a creative product that can be consumed by a lot of people, then by the very nature of what you're producing, it will not be a hugely impactful myth. So the magic is being able to produce something that can be widely consumed and maintain the integrity that you would want to have. And that's extremely hard to do.
I want to say something about this gentleman's question, and then I have a question. I'm a computer networker. I make some of the robots that are taking people's jobs. This is a technological eventuality. It's going to happen when everything is going to be free. There will be no jobs. So what will happen eventually is people are going to do 4 things. They're going to play, and whatever that means. They're going to learn about whatever they want. They're going to practice working. They won't have to, but you'll get tired of stuff and you'll want to see what you could have done. And then you're going to be able to help other people socially, like what they were talking about.
Don't you think they're going to make movies for each other?
As part of playing.
Yeah. Okay.
Work becomes play.
Yeah.
And the question I had was, how do you guys propose to dismantle the money establishment that is, demanding that we pay taxes and that we have to work in order to pay our taxes and kind of keeping us on that treadmill?
I think the Buckminster Fuller approach to that. Buckminster Fuller had a statement that you don't fight the system head on. You create a new model that makes the old existing model obsolete.
And I think it's going to dismantle itself.
Oh, that's what I was
and I think it's already started. I also would say that when people start losing their houses, when people start becoming jobs, I think they're going to start thinking about these kind of ideas that they may not be thinking about right now. And so with social activist pressure that we propose, along with the declining monetary system, I think it'll eventually happen.
And the other thing, and you know this better than most of us, is because of the technological changes, the capacity to get a lot more for a lot less is at an all-time high. And so as...
They have, planned obsolescence. They want to keep you on that.
Right, that's my...
Right, but at the same time, so you have planned obsolescence, but at the same time, I can get Kyle and Rob back there to set you up with a food system that gets you 3 times as much food as you've ever had in your entire life while using 90% fewer resources. And that type of an environment, so basically it's as resource, so why did this farming system happen? It happened because of the monetary system. The cost of the water for the farm broke the farm. So the farm changed using technology to a system that has a lower financial component, costs less, with the control variable being water in this particular instance, and then simultaneously gives you more, and that the spending a lot, that the quantum aspects of basically reducing by 99% the cost component while simultaneously increasing the output by the same order of magnitude, 100x, is everywhere right now. It's just not widely in deployment, but I believe that as the stresses of economic scarcity continue to rise, and as people like Mike and others are able to illustrate that he can live better than some of my richest friends on pennies because he relates to the resource system in a different way, that will ultimately be, but with that said, there's going to be a tremendous amount of pain. Remember, the human beings, the self-organizing principle of human beings is the path of least resistance. And it is only when the way that it is being done is so phenomenally, horrendously, disastrously uncomfortable that people will make the change. But that's their problem.
And there's an eventuality to robots basically taking over the world and doing things better than humans can do. Because when a robot gets to that point, why would they still use humans in a job? And so when you think about it in an eventuality way, let's say you think it's 200 years, 100 years, we're going to get to that point. How are people going to be thinking about themselves and their existence when they don't have to work anymore to survive? So it's this type of transition to that type of thinking that needs to happen as well, not just the physical transition. But I think it happens hand in hand.
But what you're saying is horrifying.
Right. To a lot of people. From one perspective.
As long as we agree.
From one perspective, I mean, it could free us from, what we've been trapped in our entire existence, where we have to spend a segment of our life to get what we need to survive. And if some point in the future we just push a button and
but it still creates an existential crisis for a society that
does.
Where the myth is to work.
Well, it's kind of like how industrialization, did that in a lot of ways.
No, it totally did. Yeah, I mean, it's the same thing.
Well, that's with energy. I mean, for all of history, energy that we harnessed to get what we wanted was human energy. We had to build things with human effort. Now we have all different types of energy that create things for us. So the more that we harness this outside energy, the less that we're going to have to use our own to create things that we want.
Sustainably harness it.
But at the same time, the more we're going to have to figure out what the hell we're going to do with ourselves.
Well, that's what the most important thing is now. I mean, if we're talking about the monetary system, the most important thing that we could do now is to invest in things that are going to create a sustainable planet for the future. So renewable resources, solar panels, or other types of renewable energy, and an abundance of food, and things that humanity needs to sustain themselves would be thereby more important than winning the video game.
Educating people about this.
So I understand that you guys have what we were talking about is like at some point in the future, and we've talked about this transitional period. And I heard a lot of people like nod when somebody mentioned that they feel like the system's going to just internally collapse itself, which is how I feel, that it's just going to internally collapse. But the thing that scares me, and that I'm wondering if you guys are talking about this at all, or maybe we should be, but there's a group of people who don't want all this stuff to happen. That's why it's not happening right now. It was designed this way. They have a lot of guns and military and tanks and stuff, and a lot of people believe that they're trying to shut our country down right now democratically. So I mean, do you just look at this as being something like way off in the future, and there's probably going to be this huge like chaotic time period before we get to that? Like, what if the government comes and locks our country down and we're not free to do stuff like this, or even talk to each other or pass information around anymore?
Maybe the first one to admit that the Zeitgeist movement, there are no members in this chapter that own a crystal ball. We don't know what the future is going to bring. We don't know if we'll be able to transition to a resource-based economy. We would like to see it happen, but there's no guarantees that something like this will manifest itself in the future. We could be an evolutionary cul-de-sac. We definitely have that capability to wipe ourselves off the face of the earth, with also the majority of the other species along with us. The only thing that we can do right now is educate ourselves and educate others as much as possible.
And I don't think people don't want this type of lifestyle. I think people just don't know about it. And I think that's what we're doing, is awareness. We're not building a resource-based economy tomorrow. We realize we need more people with our frame of mind, or even have some hope into moving into a resource-based economy. Right now in Florida, there's resource-based communities, and that's kind of starting up a little bit, where a group of people like ourselves would create our own little community. Obviously, in the long run, we want this to be globalized. That's when it's really going to be effective. But these are small steps to that. But yeah, we don't know what the future will hold or what will happen, but we're trying. And I can speak for all of us. We're sick of the way the system's run. So at least in our little community, we're going to try to build awareness, whether it's successful or not, whether it's going to be in our lifetime or not. We're definitely trying for that.
And I kind of look at it as though like you're traveling on an airplane or a cruise ship going to a particular destination. You're kind of blown off course by all the waves and the wind or whatever, but you have that clear goal of the direction you're going. So eventually you finally get there if we get enough support. Like myself personally, on a personal level, I mean, I'm really into the wilderness survival, as you guys know, running out there naked and stuff. Thanks for bringing it. Well, now with the mythology thing, I'll have to throw on a little cape, like swimming goggles or something. But
it will make a better story. Which
there you go. I got to seriously consider that. Yeah. But anyway, like me on a personal level, I mean, I'm really doing everything I can to hope for the best, but prepare for the worst. I mean, I kind of see this whole thing just totally collapsing, and me going out in the woods and training a core group of people on how to live out there and move like Apache scouts. That's really what I see coming down the track, and I'm prepared to do that. So,
but
if it doesn't, hopefully it doesn't. That's what I'm trying to put my energies toward now, because. If I didn't come across this, this concept, I mean, I think that I would be out in the woods right now and already being like, okay, let's wait for everything to collapse.
Just checking the clock. I mean, my attitude is sort of spend as much time as possible building and discovering the bypass systems, greenhouse networks, these types of things. That's the first and foremost.
Go around the problem.
Build the bypass system. Ignore the problem and build the bypass system first and foremost. Second, build awareness of the bypass system and build myths about the bypass system so that other people naturally self-organize into building bypass systems. And as that happens, be aware of the fact that human beings organize by way of the path of least resistance, that the path of least resistance is to maintain the broken system and will remain to maintain the broken system for an indefinite period of time. And that at some point the broken system will transition to the bypass system in a way that is either extremely expensive in terms of human life and finance, or not. And I don't know which one. And I think that whether it's really expensive in terms of the apocalyptic narrative or not, which is an unknown, is largely a function of what we do now. The one thing that we do have some influence over is the probability of the apocalyptic narrative goes down every time we think and act and behave in a way that is not apocalyptic in the way we relate to each other. And the probability of the apocalyptic narrative goes up every time we think and behave in a way that goes towards an apocalyptic environment. But the fear is, I think, very understandable. And it's the stress of that difference between possible and reality. You're experiencing, you're looking at that gap and you're saying, she's going to blow. This ain't going to work.
There's a question back there.
Yeah, Bill, I was just going to say, I agree with everything that you said, and pretty much everything that's said tonight, except for that one point that you kind of hammered on, which is the statement that people follow the path of least resistance. Actually, if you look at human history, when there's a unifying myth, people take the path of the most resistance.
Totally agree.
And recreate it.
The myth is
the
exception.
The difficulty that I have is finding what the unifying myth is going to be. We've talked a lot about myths, and there's a lot of personal myths. And if you're a Jungian, the personal myth is it. And I really like your approach. I think I take an approach a little bit like you. I go back, I'm an antitrust lawyer for 30 years, and go back to the 60s. And, when I look at the city here, I say, okay, that's a command economy.
Right, that's what I thought. I think it's crazy.
Yeah, and I love command economies. I love communism.
Sure.
I loved it. But the difficulty for me is, and I wonder if it's not for Zeitgeist, is what's the unifying myth that's going to engender cultural action and
benefit from our veterans' decision to turn themselves into
Exactly, yeah. I guess we can't force them to do anything, but...
Yeah, yes.
of a way you can base your life, find meaning in your life.
The least divisive mythological identity on the earth right now is the soldier, in my opinion. The doctor's divisive, the teacher's divisive, the cowboy is not that existent, the farmer doesn't really... If you look at sort of the historical archetypes, but the soldier is still very present in our contemporary society and is very non-divisive.
I'll throw out one thing too, if you want, and that's
that's obviously purely an opinion.
No, it's all opinion. It's all opinions, right?
Yeah.
But one thing that I'll throw out is that we've moved. We've had this end of time thing, which a lot of people relate to the shift from the Piscean, to talk about it in astrological terms, to the Aquarian age. And the Aquarian age creates, has kind of an understanding of what the new myth needs to be and what it is. And I was taken by the first Zeitgeist movie that I saw because it dealt with myths and how important myths are and how pervasive they are and necessary for human existence. So
their foundation, right? They are the base harmonic for human existence.
Yeah.
And that's
that's where I saw the value, and really see the value in the movement, is raising that issue and probing what is the unifying myth going to be that's going to shift us into possibly a situation where we won't just destroy ourselves.
Well, what I find is interesting, even just like in my interactions with ABC right now, we're preparing to do another big thing for ABC Primetime on Memorial Day with some of the guys in this room around sustainable food and sort of the stuff that you saw from the Mike Haynes clinic. Is the reconciliation, most of this sort of zeitgeisty stuff or the sustainable movement stuff tends to skew towards a bunch of damn hippies yammering about how it's supposed to be. It's a bunch of crap. And so...
Survivalists.
Yeah, and survivalists, these guys. Well, I don't even know what I'm doing here with you people, right?
Not even fringers.
And so the idea of the soldier or the Marine validating that narrative publicly is incredibly powerful. Because it's one thing for a bunch of hippies or survivalists to talk about, oh, well, we've got to grow our own food and we don't have enough water and oh, boo-hoo, And it's another thing for our heroes to say to us, we don't have enough food and water. You know. We need to do something about that.
That reminds me of that clip of that guy screaming, he was a veteran and during Occupy. And he
Right.
started
The guy in
ranting
Times Square, you're saying?
Yeah, right.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
that's kind of, I think, what you're talking about is that
Right.
that real symbolic thing where people can't dismiss it as Hollywood writing it like this is a guy pouring his heart out, and he has the respect of a lot of people.
Right.
So that gets a lot of attention,
Yeah.
and the more attention that we get in that direction is the better chance we have of it catching on as a widespread cultural thing.
I mean, that's why I love Roland calling the Archer play out. Because he looks like he's a handsome 6'4" short-haired blonde boy from California who looks like he'll kick your ass. And he talks all crazy hippie talk about the need for saving water. You're like, who is this guy?